The law matters. Of course it does. Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, your host and moderator. This program has been created to educate, inform, and help you with law matters because the law matters. Understand the law better, and you're in a better position to decide how to protect yourself, your family, and your business. We continue to provide information and resources that'll help you decide whether or not you need or want to contact a lawyer. Perhaps will help you decide that you can actually handle some issues yourself. If you do decide to seek outside professional counsel, you'll be better prepared, and of course, so will the professional you select. Our goal, of course, is to help you achieve the best possible results while saving time and money. We continue to welcome and thank Attorney David Bazar from Bazar and Associates law firm in East Providence. He continues to weigh in on the various topics that we tackle from week to week. And today we're going to tackle the legal profession, what you need to know from schools to the bar exam. Things have changed. The Bar Association, what it does, your careers, what your prospects are, things have changed. So I think first I want to say congratulations. David is about to be president. He is president-elect right now of the Rhode Island Bar Association.
Thank
so
you.
We'll talk about that a little bit too. So people say, I think I want to become a lawyer. Do I really? What does it require if you are, say, a college student at the undergraduate level? How do people start?
So at the college level, there's really no requirements for law school, unlike, I should say, medical school, where you might need to take organic chemistry and a number of other courses before you apply to medical school. For law school, you really can take about anything. And so I'll give you just my path to law school, which was I was in college and I was going to go work for my father. And my brother was at law school, so I had become a history major very late in the game. And I would go down to the law school and my brother would say, you should apply to law school when you'll get out, we'll practice together. So he took me in to see the dean of the law school, and the dean said, where do you go to college? I was at Trinity College. He said, we really want to keep kids from Connecticut, because Trinity's in Hartford, in state to go to law school. So you graduate, you get a certain score on your LSAT, and we'd be glad to have you. So I went back to Trinity. I said, when do you give the LSAT? That's on a Monday. We give it on Saturday, but you can walk in and sign in and take it. So I took it. I did pretty well. I went to law school. I got out. I said to my brother, hey, let's practice law. He said, who wants to practice law? I'm working for Dad. I think he always had a plan, even from the beginning. But the point is, actually, a law school education is not only needed and of course great to become a lawyer, but it's really helpful for anything you might do in life, including business.
Well, I've read, and I'm sure you could discuss even more fully, that there are many options that have direct correlation if you choose not to be the one who goes to a law practice. We could talk about those, but in terms of the path, many who are in college right now as freshmen or sophomore, they may be taking English, they don't know what they want to do, maybe they're taking math. Would you say it's safe to say that it wouldn't matter at that point whether they have a BA, a BS, or what their actual degree is, as long as they're well educated and do well on the LSATs?
I would absolutely say that. I don't think it matters. You should take what really is a passion for you, what interests you, whether it's a liberal arts education. Theater majors might be great lawyers because the acting career might really play into being a trial lawyer. English is great for writing and all of what you need to do as an attorney on the writing side of things. So it doesn't really matter. Just a broad education and a number of exposure to different areas would be very helpful. The LSAT obviously is going to be a requirement for the law school to get into, but just take what you're interested in, what your passion is, and do as well as you can in that, and I think it'll serve you well.
Apparently there was a time when people would complain about how tough it is to get into law school, and apparently as of 2016 statistics, the 14 top schools are now saying that their average number of applicants is down. And in the lower tier of schools, that it's down significantly, 52.3%, and the other 20.6%. Would that make you think that these law schools are lowering their standards? I wouldn't hope so.
No. I don't think so at all. I think the top schools are still going to be just as difficult to get into, and it's really whether they have 10 applications for every spot or 5 applications for every spot, they're still going to be difficult to get into, and they're not going to lower their standards, and I don't think they have to. There are other law schools, and there are law schools that, when I was in law school, that would take people and give them a chance. And you know what? They didn't take everybody, but they took a lot, you know, if you want to say they had a lower standard for acceptance, but they had just the same standard for graduation. So those schools may have taken in 200 first-year law students, but may have only graduated 100.
Weed them out.
They
I
weeded
think
them out.
that's a good point, and that's encouraging for people who, as you say, might not have started out with a stellar academic career, but have other things that then help them focus, and perhaps they
Right.
become good candidates by the time they're ready to graduate. We understand that it's expensive to go to law school. Any significant difference whether someone chooses to go the full-time route versus part-time and strew it out over more years?
Right.
Thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think there's still, there are some, but I don't think there's a lot of law schools that allow the part-time anymore. I think it was a very good program for those people who were still working and couldn't afford to give up work, you know, so they went at night part-time, and I got just as good an education, put the time and effort in, and, you know, had to balance and juggle a lot of things. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for that. That is probably one of the main reasons that, well, there's probably several reasons, but one of the reasons is the expense, and people come out with a large amount of debt, and jobs are
Certainly.
hard to get. Sure, there's still, you can get jobs, but it's not as easy because there's still a lot of need for lawyers, but there's already a lot of lawyers, so it's not easy to come out and become a lawyer from law school. But I think that, again, just that education can be very useful in a number of different areas other than practicing law.
So people talk now about the value of distance learning. They can do it remotely. They can do it between 12 and 2 a.m. if that's what their schedule works on their schedule. Can that happen in law school? Could you absolutely take online courses, some courses, maybe not labs or clinicals or whatever? But
I think the traditional approach to learning in law school, in my opinion, and so I'm not a very technology advanced person or technological, I think that the whole process in how law is taught requires you to be in the classroom, because they use the Socratic method, which is the law professor will call on somebody and there's a debate and a conversation, and more of a debate than a conversation as to what the right answer is, and the professor's pulling out the answer as part of the discussion that's going back and forth. And I think it's part of learning to think on your feet. And yes, you need to know the law, but you need to think on your feet and create an argument and defend your position. And to me, that requires a classroom of people with the professor at the front of the room directing the debate.
good insight. So you made it through law school. Then there's this terrible sort of Damocles called that bar exam. What are the requirements? I understand that now there's a thing called a uniform bar exam, UBE, and it makes it easier for people to pass a bar in one state and then practice in another if they want to. But what's the story between graduation and taking that, sitting for the exam, as they say?
So there's a couple of things there that you're talking about. First of all, when I graduated, it was difficult to take a bar exam in more than one state because every state controls, and still does, its admission to the practice of law. So when I took the bar exam, Rhode Island gave its exam on a Tuesday, I believe. The multi-state part of the exam was on a Wednesday, which was the same exam that everybody took everywhere, that every state that required the multi-state. And then on Thursday, Massachusetts gave its exam. So you could sit for Rhode Island and Mass at the same time. Then they changed that, so they made it much more difficult to sit for both states, because I think they gave it both on the same day just to stop that, the ease of doing that. And so you would sit for one state one time and then the other state another time. And so what do you do to prepare for those exams was we had bar exam courses. And in Rhode Island, at the time I took it, there was a fellow who taught a Rhode Island exam, and he knew what cases the examiners had at the time, so he could tell you, you need to know this because he's got this case up at the Supreme Court, and he's going to write about that because that's what this examiner is working on. This is what another examiner is working on. So he was pretty good at predicting the essay portion, which is the state portion in Rhode Island of the exams at the time. And of course, then the review for the multi-state. There were also national companies, and there still are, that do the multi-state national part of the exam. And so you take that bar review class because everything you learned in law school is great, but what's going to be on the exam to pass it is really more important for the exam itself. And then you sit for the exam. Now, you talked about the uniform bar exam, and what that is it allows states still to regulate what you need for a score to be considered, to be accepted into the bar, to pass. But the exam itself is the same, so you can take it and apply that score to more than one state so that you can take the exam in multiple states at the same time.
There seems to be some pro and con debate about this UBE situation, but all will point out that there are laws that vary from state to state, and some will say, well, we shouldn't just deal with the quirkiness of, say, Rhode Island or Massachusetts, but beyond that, at least someone who goes to school in one state can practice in another, and you explain some of the difficulties of trying to sit for two at once. And I understand it's a 2 to 3 day process, written and oral, I assume?
Well,
or is it just written?
The test itself is a written test.
Okay.
And like I said, when I took it, it was the state exam and the multi-state exam. Mm-hmm. That was over 2 days. But there's also an oral part of it, if you will, in the sense that there's a character and fitness portion where you will be interviewed by one of the board of bar examiners, and you have to take that fitness, portion of it. And there's also an ethics portion. So there's the multi-state ethics portion of the test. That didn't exist when I took it necessarily as part of the exam itself, but I think it came in while I think you had to take it before you actually could be sworn in.
So you
but
graduate.
Who can remember back that far?
So you graduate from law school. Is there a 2-year, 5-year window within which you have to take that exam, or can you take it 10 years after you graduated? Is there any ceiling on that?
For each bar?
For what would be now, I guess, the UBE, do you know if there's a ceiling on that? Could it be 5 years or 2?
I'm not sure about that,
okay.
But what I can tell you is that if you are a member of one bar, there are some procedures to become a member of another bar that, at least up till now, have not required sitting for a new exam. It was more of an application process, and depending on how long you've been practicing, so that's why I thought with the number of years you were going with, you could just sort of, they call it waive in to the other bar. If it's less years of practice, I think maybe you still had to take the exam.
Okay. Comment if you would. I mentioned earlier the top tier schools, but as long as I understand it, it is an ABA accredited school. Are there other law schools that are not ABA accredited? Yep. And what would you suggest to a would-be candidate to look for?
Right.
And why?
So, an ABA accredited school allows you to sit for the bar of almost any state. And so if you go to a law school in Rhode Island and you want to practice in New York, you can go and sit for the New York bar as long as the Rhode Island Law School, which it is accredited by the ABA and allows you therefore to be eligible to sit for the other bar. There are some law schools that are only accredited by the state that it's in, and therefore you can only take the bar in the state that the law school is in.
So you might want to know about whether or not that's a provisional situation.
You really need to know. Yeah, and that there is provisional accreditation by the ABA, which means the school, you can take the exam in any state because it's been provisionally accredited before it receives full accreditation.
What does this cost?
Who?
What does it cost to take that exam? I've read some.
The bar exam?
Yes.
I'm sure it varies from state to state, and I can tell you what I paid for it when I took it
years ago?
in 1892, but I'm not 100% sure what it is today.
So would it seem reasonable to you that $750 in the state of New York at some point recently would be?
It's probably about right.
Okay.
I would assume that's the case.
And here in New England, hopefully it's less.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that it is.
Do you get a discount if you have to take it again?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And there is a limited number of times that you can take.
I was going to ask that. Okay.
Yeah. So what happens is, this goes back a long time, but there was a case with a guy who kept sitting for the bar and taking it numerous times. And I think was sort of unsettling to some of the people who were taking the bar when he was getting up after about an hour of a 3-hour test and walking out, and people are saying, did I do something wrong? Am I missing something here? So because of that situation, at least in Rhode Island, they put in a rule that you had to get court approval to be able to take it beyond the 3rd time.
Is that still the case?
I think so.
Interesting. I imagine it must be pretty daunting if at the first time, never mind if you end up going back a 2nd or a 3rd.
Right.
So you've taken your classes at law school, you've passed your bar exam. Is there a minimum level of a certain score that you have to have in order to be admitted for this UBE? Or
so every state's going to set their own regulate their admission to the bar and their own requirements. So I don't know the scoring per se, but I believe Rhode Island, I don't know, I think it's like 138, but I can't even tell you what that means because I don't know how they score it.
Yes.
So suffice it to say that every state will have its own requirement for admission, and its own, like I said, Rhode Island requires that character and fitness examination and all of that, and then you do all of those things and then you get sworn in. Now I'll tell you what has changed is going way back, and this is actually predating me, there was a requirement of an internship, a year of tutelage under another attorney that had been a member of the bar for a period of time. And then that was done away with, and there was a requirement for a continuing legal education, so to speak, or core requirement of classes on practical skills that the state of Rhode Island required, and that's been done away with as well.
So you've taken the test, you've passed the bar, swearing in happens a week after that? Is it on a rotating basis? How does that set up?
The Supreme Court schedules the swearing in, and they schedule it usually in the same time frame after the results are out that they always do. I think if the results come out from the summer exam in, I don't know, September, October, it was November or so that the swearing-ins were scheduled for.
And so once you're sworn in, then you begin to apply to, if you wanted to join a firm, would you apply then? Would you wait until, or would you do it the minute you pass the bar? How does that process work if you want to go to a lawyer's office or attorney's office?
I actually started my first year of law school. And so what I did is I asked to go to work for a small firm to do an internship. And I met with the senior partner, and I told him I was interested in doing a summer clerkship or internship. And he said, well, we've never had anyone do that before. I said, that's fine, I've never done it before, so we'll learn together. So I worked there that summer, and then I went back and worked the next summer and was offered a job for when I graduated. So when I graduated, I worked there while I was studying to take the bar. And the whole idea was that I would pass the bar and then become an attorney there, and that's what in fact happened.
That's good. I read somewhere in preparing for this that it's a good idea for you to have some experience and, as you call it, an internship. They note, which was very interesting, didn't matter whether you were paid or not paid. If you'd still been in the law office, you will have, by osmosis or whatever, you would have acquired some practical skills and information that would make you a better candidate for a job.
Yep. I agree with that. And I would encourage someone who is finishing their first year of law school. I actually went to that firm and said, I'll do it unpaid. I just wanted to get my foot in the door and do that. And so I worked another job, but did my 40 hours a week actually at that job, and then worked at night, and they actually gave me money at the end, which I wasn't expecting and wasn't part of our agreement. But whether it was unpaid or paid, I think it's worth it to get your foot in the door that first year, to learn, to see, all right, you learn what you learn in law school, but how does it translate to a practice? It's much different. You need to get that practical experience, which then if I didn't get a job at that law firm, I would have actually had all of that experience under my belt for when I applied for a job somewhere else if I needed to do that.
Good. So I want to talk a little bit about the Rhode Island Bar Association, of which you were a part and certainly ready to take the reins soon. If you aren't going to practice law, might you still be part of the Rhode Island Bar Association?
So if you're going to be a licensed attorney in Rhode Island, you're a part of the Rhode Island Bar Association because we have what's called a unified bar, which means that every lawyer is a member of the Bar Association if they're licensed to practice law by the Supreme Court.
Good to know. So discuss some of the other options that come to your mind as viable careers if you go through law school, take that bar exam, but don't end up being in an attorney's office.
Okay. All right. And we'll talk more about the Bar Association later. And I'm not really ready to be the president. I've got a year to go, which is good.
Training. Okay.
So,
That's valuable training.
Well, and we have a great president, so I'll let her do her job for the year, and then we'll figure out what I'm going to do after that.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
Okay. So what else could you do with a law degree? Well, a lot of people are interested in go work for the FBI. It's great training for that, perfect knowledge base for what you need to know and going into that field. So that's a great example right there. Another example is business. You want to become a CEO of a very large corporation, an MBA is helpful, so is a law degree. And it gives you a real base of knowledge of things that you should be familiar with if you're going to run a company of any size.
So you mentioned a couple of those possible careers. In politics and government, we certainly have had Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, they were lawyers, must have been helpful. If you wanted to become an advocate, good to know the law.
Yeah, lobbyist, for example.
Lobbyist.
Being a lawyer, understanding the process, understanding the law that you're lobbying for, and all of those types of things. Many lobbyists are lawyers.
You mentioned taking theater classes or being a major. You might be a Savannah Guthrie of the Today Show and be an anchor or host or whatever, doing news with that bent.
I think if you're going to go in that world, to have that knowledge base, to be able to understand when you have somebody on your show and they're saying stuff that you know just isn't right, to be able to call them out on it is very helpful.
Good point. Other careers that might come to mind, if you're a writer, you might end up being writing about that topic or cases that are being considered, or Supreme Court justices who are being considered, or perhaps you are just an analyst.
Sure. And think about how many great fiction writers there are who practice law at one time or another. And maybe I'm just biased towards that type of writing, but I enjoy those books, and I think it's a great background, both from the experience. You know, they always say, oh, you've had so many cases, you could write a book. Yeah, and a lot of it would probably want to be fiction because nobody would believe half of the stories that you have anyway.
Of course, we should point out, too, that those who don't want to practice, maybe they might want to join academia. They might be professors.
Sure. Absolutely.
Another viable and worthwhile thing.
Yeah, there's, as I said at the very beginning, there's a number of different routes you could take with that education in your back pocket, and it's just a great foundation to build off of.
So, back to the Rhode Island Bar Association. Are there many attorneys who you know who are at the Rhode Island Bar Association, for example, who aren't currently practicing in a firm but are part of these other careers or industries?
Absolutely. If you maintain your license to practice law, whether active or inactive, you're a member of the Bar Association. And there are a lot of services that the bar provides. And there's a number of services the bar provides both to the public at large and to attorneys.
Address those. So they'll help students along the way, the general public, and theoretically they're supposed to be helping attorneys too. So review a few of those.
So it's more than just theoretically. There's a number of things that the bar does for attorneys. So you're a young attorney, you just passed the bar, you're just starting out. There's CLEs that the Bar Association provides, both for the young attorneys and for seasoned attorneys, because it's required by the Supreme Court that you take a certain number of hours of CLE every year to maintain
means?
continuing legal education.
Thank
you
you
for calling me out on that.
No, just point of clarification.
Okay. Yes, and actually you may have seen in the news that there's been a little bit of a to-do with some lawyers who haven't maintained their CLEs and have been working perhaps for the government and not doing everything that needed to be done. But the Bar does provide an annual bar meeting that gives you all the numbers of CLEs that you need for the year, but also during the year, free CLEs and ethics and other continuing legal education options
Great.
for any area that any lawyer practicing law might be interested in.
Certainly something we wouldn't necessarily know about, so thank you
Right.
for that. General public, what is Rhode Island Bar?
General public, because there's more for lawyers, but we can go back to that too if you want.
Okay.
General public, so you need a lawyer. You always ask, how do you get a lawyer? Word of mouth with other people who've had good experience, always a great way to do it. But there are a number of programs available at the Bar Association for referrals to lawyers. There's the Lawyer Referral Service, which is you can afford to pay for a lawyer, you just don't know where to find one. You call the Bar Association. The Lawyer Referral Service will listen to the type of case you have, where you are geographically in the state, and refer you to an attorney that can help you in that area.
Or 3 or 4, so lest it seem like they're championing one over another, right?
Well, they have a rotating basis to do
Good
it,
to know.
so they do it, and that's another actual service to both the public and the lawyers, because if you're a young lawyer, I would absolutely encourage you to join that program and start building a practice up with that. There's also the reduced fee program, which is you need a lawyer, you can't afford to hire a lawyer for a full fee, so lawyers will sign up to help the public out with the reduced fee based on a lower hourly rate, lower retainer, to help someone who needs help but can't afford to pay a full fee for an attorney. That's a very good program. And of course, there's the volunteer lawyer program, which is lawyers will volunteer to take cases pro bono, and those are based on a need that somebody has that cannot afford to pay anything. And it's helpful to, of course, the community, but it's helpful to the lawyer too, because if you take pro bono cases, you can qualify for free CLEs.
Good to know. For students, you help with financial aid, there are scholarships?
There is a scholarship program through the Rhode Island Bar Foundation that will help provide a scholarship.
And you have specific days where you go into classrooms?
There's a number of different programs, one of which is Law Day, where lawyers and judges will go to schools around the state that want them to come in to talk about whatever the topic of the year is.
What's the Bar Association website, David?
I think it's ribar.org, if I'm correct.
Because whether you're a teacher or you need help, Rhode Island Bar Association?
There's a lot of resources available to you.
Same with Mass, same with Connecticut.
Correct.
Good to know. We hope that this has been helpful to you if you are interested in learning more about being a lawyer or how to help one, or if you need one. Stay tuned to Law Matters, because the law matters to you.